Hi, Gerd. And before you answer, is Gerd pronounced correctly?
Hi, Adam. No, it's not. But it's very close because like you're German, right?
Yeah.
So it the G is a little bit softer. It's Geert.
Ah, so you are from Netherlands.
Yeah, I am. I mean, my dad was, and then I've lived in Belgium for a big part of my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
Gerd.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Perfect. So I didn't knew that. I suspected that maybe you are from Belgium or Netherlands,
Yeah.
but yeah. But I said okay. Okay, Gerd. And everyone pronounced in the US Gerd as well. No.
Oh, everyone gets it wrong.
Okay.
It's totally fine. It's actually like always an interesting conversation starter. And
Okay.
I have these tips and tricks, like do this with your tongue and do that with your mouth, and then maybe like it will get closer.
Okay. So perfect. Now to back to the important stuff. What was your first computer?
Ooh, that's an awesome question. The first computer that I actually touched was I think it's a ZX Spectrum or a VIC-20, but I'm not certain. But the first computer that I owned was a Commodore 64.
Okay.
I was like a teenager and I was dreaming of programming. I thought it was just the most amazing thing. If you thought about it, you can just tell a machine what to do it and it would
Mm-hmm.
do it. And it's like so sci-fi to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was like going to bookshops when there were still like bookshops everywhere and looking at programming books, just imagining what it would be if I would be able to do that. And then for about, I think 2 years, I saved up all my chores money and I did like extra jobs and I made like these postcards that my mom helped me to make with dried flowers to save up. Like I basically saved up coins to
Mm-hmm.
go buy a Commodore 64 in the local Fnac. I don't know if they had Fnacs in Germany. It was sort of
No,
like,
but it's an interesting name. Fnax is the name.
it's FNAC. It's
Okay.
sort of like a media store. They had books, they had
Okay.
audio, and then computers when those came around. Um, and I actually literally went to buy that Commodore 64 with a bag of coins.
Okay.
They were not very happy about that. But yes,
But what
that
do you
was
had before the Commodore 64? Nothing. So just dreams.
nothing. No, nothing. I was writing code on pieces of paper with books that I bought and snippets that I just found around. It's like imagining what it would do. Like obviously everything was wrong because
Mm-hmm.
I never even read anything. But we had a library, a local library in the little village where I lived, and they had, I think it was weekly sort of initiation classes of new technology and whatnot. And they had a VIC-20 with logo running on it. So you had the
Okay.
little turtle, and
Mm-hmm.
then I was like, oh, I can make the turtle do things. Yeah. So that was the start.
But how your excitement began? So this is interesting because no, I mean there is no way that you just out of thin air you wanted just to program. You saw a movie or what was the start of your passion? Because
I think I just heard about it and it seemed so incredible to me. Like everyone was talking about computers, like the personal computer.
okay.
And it's sort of, yeah, you remember, right? It was like the same package. You would get the computer and you would turn it on and would just have a blinking cursor, and it's like
Yeah.
you're not doing anything, right? So
Yeah.
it's sort of like part of the deal. In order to use your computer, you start writing commands that
Mm-hmm.
turn into code and that turn into software.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was just, I mean, it's like the whole sci-fi robots, computers, like this is all super exciting. And then I was also, and this was a little bit later, but I was always very interested because I was also doing music
Mm-hmm.
back in the day. I was already playing guitar. It's like, oh, what if computers can make music?
Okay.
Um, and then a little bit later, when the Commodore Amiga came out, so you had the Atari ST and you had the Commodore Amiga. I was
500.
an Amiga fan, um, and I still remember before I had an Amiga, one of the promotional flyers that were just handed out at computer stores was just a staff with notes printed on
Mm-hmm.
them, and that would just be a screenshot. And I was
Mm-hmm.
just looking at the shapes of those notes, and it's like, look at how round they look and how pretty they are. Like those pixels are so small. I still remember thinking that. So yeah, it was sort of this combination of what it could potentially be, and like the the possibilities, the endless possibilities of creativity and imagination that it opened up. And well, I thought it would open up as a kid, and in reality, it also opened it up. Still can't believe we're living in this day and age.
So you never played? So you always just wanted to program something, or were you also fascinated
I'm a
by
gamer.
computer
I'm
games?
a gamer too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I play a lot of video computer games, but it's very hard for a game to capture my attention for a very long time, because
Mm-hmm.
usually, and there's a few of them, like Elden Ring. I played 400 hours of Elden Ring, like total Elden Ring fan. Like there's a couple of them like that over the course of a few decades. But usually I lose interest after about like an hour. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, this is too directive. I'm just following a script. It's cool, but I could just be coding, and then I can make up whatever I want.
At the beginning, I was into games. I really liked playing, but I started coding. It became boring immediately. So this was the same situation in yours.
Yeah,
Okay, this is not waste of time, but it is somehow, I don't know. It is not exciting enough, right? So because nothing happens there. This is you just directing something or doing something, but for what? So
yeah.
and now I just what I enjoy, if there's a conference and a gaming PC or whatever, just to watch for 5 minutes, the graphics and
Mhm.
this is really as old, it looks nice, but this is enough for me. So I'm not even have demand to actually play something. So
Right.
this is. Mhm.
I do try to stay up to date with gaming, because there's been these few times, because my role that I now have, I design products as well as program them and lead the team, but also do a lot of the feature design, product design, interaction design. And there are quite a few discoveries and approaches that have been made in gaming in order to convey complicated concepts or complicated directions in a way that feels intuitive.
Mhm.
It happened a number of times that games have inspired me in
Mhm.
design decisions
Mhm.
for the products that I've worked on.
Mhm.
Uh, so I do try to stay connected to it.
Funny story. Do you know the game? I think was called the Cryotech. I think is the company, and this was back then. It was like 15 years ago, I think, or 10 years ago. It
Mhm.
was. I was told it's the best graphics ever, and there were software engineers, and they told me, okay, you have in a project, you have to try it out, and it is really hard to play. So it's okay. I would try it. So I bought the game, installed it, and I think in 5 hours or something, I just completed the entire game, and no one could believe. But what I did is I just run, right? So I said, okay, this is no shooting, is waste of time. If I complete the game, I run in my direction. If I was, and I think at the end I have to shoot us a few times, but actually the purpose of the game was a first person shooter, But if you ran, I found out if just run, I would, and they said it's incredible. You were there, so yeah, I could perfectly explain where I was and so forth. And they say you are a gamer, so again maybe, and then explain what I did, and no one could believe. So this was last time I played, like 15 years, but this
You
was
hack
funny
the
story.
system.
Yeah,
You
it was like cryo, I think
Yeah,
cryotech. Yeah,
I remember, and they also have like the cryo engine that was used for
yeah,
quite a
yeah. And
yeah.
it looked really impressive. So I remember I was like, this looks almost like a real, right? So and yeah. Um, okay, so you get the Amiga or on Commodore. What was
Mhm.
your first, I would say, interesting program you wrote, or maybe not interesting? What was the very first program you wrote, and what was the progression from there? And in which programming language? I think
Okay.
Basic was the first, I
Yes,
guess.
Basic was the first program I wrote was a game,
Hmm.
um,
Wow.
copied from a book. And back I had no tape recorder. So when I first had my Commodore 64, I only had money for the computer and not for the tape recorder.
Okay.
So if I wanted to use it, I would boot it up and I would code the game that I wanted to play,
Hmm.
debug it,
Mhm.
and then maybe play it for 5 minutes, but be really happy that something was running. So like a few iterations on that. So like tried a few games that are printed. You had these books with listings that you would just get and you
Mhm.
would type them in and try things out. And then like I designed my own game and was super proud. Like
Mhm.
that's sort of the first thing, but I never saved it. Like I had it sort of printed out on pieces of paper.
Mhm.
Um, and after that, I bought this Citizen dot matrix. No, not dot. I'm sorry. The Citizen color plotter.
Mhm.
Like it, I think it
Ah,
had
okay.
6 little pens or 4 or 5. I don't remember the exact count, but you had different colored pens. You would
Mhm.
hook it up to your Amiga, and then it did nothing. Like it basically came with a manual of instructions. Like these are the basic commands you have to type in order to move your
Wow.
plotter from there to there, and in order to change pens and move it closer and farther away, and advance the sheet or retract the sheet, like all of these commands. And I was like, okay, guess I got to write a painting program.
Mhm.
So that was sort of the first program I really dived into. So I started, and like every time I had a major milestone, I made this little printout and I showed it like at school, and no one cared at all. I was like, my computer made this, and I was like, this is stupid. It looks like nothing. But I was like, oh, I'm making a painting program.
How
Um,
old were you back then with
I
the
must have been
printer?
like, that's cool. So it must have been around 11 or 12.
Well, this is incredible.
Yeah. So like I
Yeah.
was that was my thing. I was really completely enamored with it, and just kept doing
But
that.
you had access to books, right? So you could read
Yes,
books
I had
and learn.
access to
Okay.
books.
Okay.
I would often just like go to Brussels, downtown
Mhm.
Brussels, to the FNAC, and I didn't have money as a kid to buy books. It's
Mhm.
also how I learned English, because the most interesting books were in English. So
Okay.
I was like trying to figure out what it all meant,
Mhm.
um, and
Okay.
and sort of like I would like take notes and then go back home, look at the little piece of paper, and try it out on the computer. Um, and I stopped that program because I filled up the 64 kilobytes of memory, and I was like, okay, well, now I'm done. Like I can't write any more code. My computer's full. Um, and then just kept like trying little programs, and then some like 2 or 3 years later, we were at a sporting club with
Mhm.
it was like they had squash tournaments, and it was sort of a school activity.
Mhm.
And this was the advent of like computers getting everywhere, right? And people not
Mhm.
really knowing how to use them. And there was this, I think he was the manager of the place. Like he all of a sudden like came up and he says, "Does any one of your kids know anything about computers?" And it's like, I know a little bit. So I went and followed him, and said, like, I have this thing, and it's this program that is supposed to manage the tournaments, but it's not working right. And I look at it, and it's like, yeah, this looks. My initial reaction was, this looks really bad. Like this is a shitty program. Like why would anyone have done this?
Yeah.
And so I basically tell him, like, I can't really help you because it looks really buggy. Like I'm not filling in those words, saying I don't think I knew the word buggy at the time.
Yeah.
Like there's something that is not working the way it should, and I can't really fix it because I didn't write it. And it's like, and in the end, turned out that this guy was totally open with paying me as a teenager to write a custom squash tournament manager for him.
Mhm.
I was like,
Mhm.
holy shit, I can make actual money with this. Like,
Mhm.
I was just doing this for fun. I can actually make way more money than if I would be working at a little store somewhere or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but it had to be in Turbo Pascal because it had to run. Actually, no, it had to run on a PC, and the obvious choice was Turbo Pascal. I didn't want to
Mhm.
stay with Basic. I was like, I wanted to advance, and I gave him this deadline, like never having written the program for someone in my life. Like I can do this within 3 months. Like surely
Mhm.
I'll be able to do this. And I basically got started. I learned on the spot,
Mhm.
got him a version in 3 months, and it did more and better things than what his previous software did. And he gave
He
me
was
money.
happy.
bought an electric guitar and an amplifier, and I started. It's like I used the money to play music.
He was happy with
He was
the
happy.
software.
I
Hmm.
gave him a few updates, and he gave me a little bit more money. And it was, I don't remember what the amount was, but it was too little for what it was worth. It was way more than what I had ever made as a kid. So it's like
Hmm.
everyone was happy.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Which music did you play on the guitar back then? What kind of music?
Well, I've always been a singer-songwriter, like
Hmm.
acoustic guitar, steel string, but I was really interested in having an electric guitar because I'd never had one.
Hmm.
So that allowed me to purchase my first electric guitar, my first amplifier, play around with that a bit, and realizing that it's not something I really gel with. It's cool, but
Hmm.
it's just not my way of expressing myself. Um, so yeah, and then from there on, I think it's been sort of always this type of scenario where it's like something looks really cool and interesting, and I meet someone that is also cool and interesting, and I was just, yeah, I can do this for you, and then they take a bet on me, I take a bet on them, and like just challenges and moving forward and doing cool shit.
Okay, so this was interesting with the Turbo Pascal. So what happened afterwards? So you learned, you just studied computer science, or what was the progression from
No, I
Turbo
never
Pascal?
had any formal education at all. I studied to be an architect. That
Cool.
was sort of, and then I dropped out after 3 years because I realized I liked the creativity that they teach you in the first few years, but I didn't actually want to be an architect. I didn't want to deal with the actual constraints of art, like building someone a house
Hmm.
or any type of other building. But I just kept coding all the time and kept like solving things through computer technology. It's like
Hmm.
when we had to make architectural simulations, I would be coding stuff in 3D renderers and just like do it all in a way that would be expressed with code, and just write a custom renderer and write a custom 3D modeler or whatnot, just so that I could express what I had in my mind. Um,
Okay.
and so after Turbo Pascal, to Turbo C++, and then like I started to learn different varieties of C++, and then the web came along, and everyone wanted to have a website.
One question, because it seems like you say, okay, you were a problem solver, right? There's some interesting challenge, or so you did it. But
Mhm.
how you knew? Yeah, you had to learn a little bit in advance. I mean, there's no way that someone does something with Turbo Pascal and then becomes efficient or productive with C++. They are just too different, right? So you had to know that you have to learn now C++, or you learned it on the spot or in projects. So.
Well, I don't know how that switch came about. Oh, actually, I wanted to write stuff for the Amiga,
Hmm.
and Turbo Pascal did not exist on the Amiga.
Okay.
So I had to learn C and C++, and then
Okay.
I had these, they called it the ROM kernel manuals, I think.
Okay.
There's like 3 tomes of 500 pages of internals of the operating system and all the APIs.
Hmm.
I had them shipped to me. It's like, I'm going to write something for the Amiga. That was too much for me. I was not able to do that. Like, I basically read a few pages. It's like the equivalent of a complete, like, imagine documentation of the Java VM, like just like this young dude. I was like, I must have been like 18 at the time. It's like, I'm going to do this. And that was too
Hmm.
much. But what I did do was learn how to write C++, and I wrote myself an ear training program because I wanted to have something that helped me with my musical studies so that I could recognize notes, intervals, chords. And there was nothing out there at the time that would assist me to do that in the computer front. And it's like, it's so tedious for me to play back a cassette tape and try to recognize like whatever chord it is, and I would also memorize it after a while because they were always in the same order. So obvious answer was, let's just write a program for that, and that was my first shareware program that I sort of published for the Amiga.
Hmm.
And that's also when I learned a little bit of assembly back in the day, because
So you made
something
some money with the program as well?
somewhat.
Some money? So you could sell it, the shareware?
Yeah,
Or?
so I could sell it, and I could like sort of, yeah, it's just a hobby that then made a little bit of money. Yeah.
So you were lucky, because what I thought, because no, it sounds like, okay, I was interested in it, so I just did it. But the C++, switch was the right choice, right? So because I mean this was the next big thing, C and C++,
Yep.
so you were lucky. Because if there will be some proprietary Amiga programming language, so maybe it were a waste of time, right? So now you are
Right.
lucky that it was the next step. The next challenge was C++.
And then afterwards it was Java.
Why Java?
Luck. I
Okay.
was sitting in a pub. I was living downtown Brussels and
Mm-hmm.
partying a lot, going out a lot. And there was this pub I used to go to all the time. And there's this guy that sits at the pub, at the bar with me, and we start talking about like
Mm-hmm.
possibilities and technology and whatever. And he's like, well, I have this company I started with my brother. His brother, like very smart, genius dude. Um, and we're developing custom software for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, that sounds cool. And he's like, yeah, we're actually hiring. And it's like, well, I'll try that
Mm-hmm.
out if you want to. And so we ended up spending the whole night at the bar, like, getting pretty wasted. But then the next day, he said, like, you should just come over. And the next barely any sleep
Mm-hmm.
ended up at that spot. Talked with his brother, was very impressed, like, oh wow, I can learn a lot from this person, because I never really had a lot of people that I could learn from.
Mm-hmm.
And Dave wanted to hire me and I wanted to work there, and he was a huge Java advocate. Like, that was
Mm-hmm.
Java 1.0. He
Okay.
saw the possibilities of Java, and he was working on projects for the European Space Agency.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I'll teach you Java if you do the menial stuff, if you just do the small projects. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm basically like a little bit of an assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I got really, really interested in the possibilities of Java and
Mm-hmm.
everything it could do.
Mm-hmm.
And then got more and more involved there, and more projects. Did like several like e-commerce systems or backend systems for specific chains
Mm-hmm.
of retail stores. Helped
So
out
you
with
use application servers like Java Sun Web Server or Tomcat
Mhm.
back then.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep,
Mm-hmm.
yep, yep. And then I could see the possibilities of Java, but I was still very much this sort of, and I still kind of am, I guess, this sort of gung ho, let's just do shit type
Mm-hmm.
of stuff. And I decided to leave them because it was over. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
felt like there was no more progression for me. And there was high demand for doing things on the web, like
Mm-hmm.
dynamic interactive websites.
Mm-hmm.
So I got into that and did a bunch of consultancy jobs, and then really, really very lucky. Like, I've been lucky quite a few times. There's
Mm-hmm.
one of the consultants knew someone that was working. He was kind of a higher up dude at Proximus. I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
know, it's a mobile company in Belgium, mobile
Mm-hmm.
phone company.
Mm-hmm.
They were sort of one of the first big mobile phone companies out there in
Mm-hmm.
Belgium, and they needed um, a custom solution for tailored promotions and sales activities for
Mm-hmm.
individual customers and individual
Mm-hmm.
products,
Mm-hmm.
based on their sales history, based on their payment history, based on the different type of solutions that they wanted to push forward with a particular strategy. And they had been working with I think it was Accenture for 2 years and never really got to anything.
Mm-hmm.
But he had sort of promised that it would be done 3 months from now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
by the time I met him, it's like, it should be done. Could you do this? Because
Mm-hmm.
someone had told him that I was a good programmer. And I'm like, this is a lot. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're asking a lot from me here. So I basically struck a really hard bargain. My conditions were, yes, I can do this, but you pay me a lot of money. It's the first
Mm-hmm.
thing. Secondly, I give you no guarantees. Like,
Hmm.
I'm not signing anything that promises quality, deliverables, anything. Thirdly, I keep the ownership of all the code.
Hmm.
You don't own the IP, I own it.
Hmm.
And I promise you, I'll do everything I can to get this done in 3 months.
Hmm.
And I got it done in 3 months. And they went live, used it. All these conditions were met. Plus, they wanted me to continue maintaining it. So they basically paid me a maintenance fee, a monthly
Hmm.
maintenance fee. It's almost a regular salary just to keep that thing like evolving. And that
Hmm.
continued for 10 years.
Hmm.
Um, and since I owned the IP for all of it, that turned into what then became a framework that I published called Rife, and that I used for building out a whole bunch of other custom solutions for customers in Belgium. And every time it was sort of the same deal. Like, you can use what I did for others, but then you give me the IP for everything I write for you.
Hmm.
And I just kept it building out that way.
This was very smart. It's almost beginning of open source, right?
Yes. Yep. Yep.
The interesting part is how I found you. This is crazy. So I remember you were I don't know. I remember a podcast with you. I think it was Java Posse about Rife.
Mm-hmm.
And what I also remember is the idea of continuations.
Mm-hmm.
And then I forgot about that. But the name Rife is a nice one. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's just I just remember the name of the framework because I really like Java and like the frameworks. And recently I found you per accident on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
And then I say, okay, I know you from somewhere, and I know you from conferences. Who are you? And then I found, this Rife again. So okay, this is an interesting story actually.
Yeah.
And back then, I mean, how you got the idea to implement a web framework, Rife? This was, I think, 2006, 2005. So we had maybe JDK 1, 2
Mm-hmm.
with continuations. So how you got the idea of continuations?
Because I felt like things must be. I was using this to develop solutions for customers, right?
Hmm.
And it felt so cumbersome to do this continuous request response cycle,
Hmm.
and to always have to take into account what might have happened before reconciliating that with the state that you want to be at,
Hmm.
before continuing what you expect to happen.
Hmm.
Um, it just felt wrong.
Hmm.
And then I started researching like what else is out there, and I found Seaside that was running in Smalltalk.
Hmm.
Smalltalk having continuations natively in the language at that time already. Um,
Hmm.
and Seaside did this, and it's like, wow, this is an awesome idea. Seaside being a Smalltalk web framework.
Hmm.
Um, it was like, I wonder if this is possible in Java.
Hmm.
And so then I started learning about bytecode manipulation, and I started looking into like how bytecode is actually structured and what the primitive opcodes are, and how I could potentially hack bytecode so that I could add continuations in the context of a web execution application. And turned out that was possible. So learned bytecode manipulation, put that in there, and that sort of got me to speak at a lot of conferences and gave that framework some of its popularity back then.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And what continuations are, um, it is like you are persisting the stack, right? So you're persisting the entire call stack, and you can, if you come back, you can just resume your work where you left. So there are no
Yeah.
sessions. It's just for you it looks like yeah, just I would say of just a regular single threaded Java program, right?
Yep. Yep. You just say pause here, and then the next request comes around, and it resumes from there. It reconstitutes all your local state, and you can be certain that nothing else was added or no changes were made, and you know exactly where you left off. So
Hmm.
it's really convenient to think about, specifically if you have a particular flow that you want to bring
Mhm.
a user through. It's like, okay, these are the different steps. A typical example: a checkout flow, or a wizard, or a questionnaire, or something that has a series of steps where you want to
Mhm.
keep track of where
Mhm.
someone is.
Mhm.
Um, that then becomes extremely trivial because you can just write it out as just
Mhm.
imperative code. Like there's no real thinking about it.
Mhm. How you did it? So back then, I mean, you manipulated bytecode. You already said that, but why and how you manipulated bytecode?
I ended up using ASM, which is now inside
Mhm.
the JDK, right?
Mhm.
Because it seemed to be, I really liked the visitor approach that ASM had compared to like others with Java Assist was sort of more like a DOM approach. Um,
Mhm.
so the way I did it was basically you have this table switch that you can use as a bytecode instruction that allows you, it's basically like a series of go-tos, and you can
Mhm.
jump to any location inside the bytecode, provided that you handle the stack correctly,
Mhm.
that the
Mhm.
stack stays coherent. And so, luckily, I didn't realize that when I set out to investigate that. The web for this is a perfect problem because it is not a full-blown continuation that you need, it's a partial one. You
Mhm.
basically want a continuation that happens as soon as your server side request is being handled, like
Mhm.
even if it's like if in a servlet or whatnot. It's, you don't want to have the continuation in this scenario over the whole execution stack. You basically want it over that very constrained, usually not that large piece of code that handles the specific logic for that request for that user.
Mhm.
So what it ended up being was two main pieces: is writing table switches that would be able to get back to where you were. So just jumping over things, following the maze to where you want to be each time. And then in parallel, track the stack so
Mhm.
that anything that is local state, you would be able to preserve it and restore it when you arrive at the location that you're
Mhm.
supposed to.
Mhm. Did it scale well? So was this like if you compare it with other solutions, was it comparable? Was it just convenient and or how performant was it actually?
I don't remember the performance numbers. There was nothing that scared me about it when I tried to push it.
Mhm.
I was, as opposed to many Java efforts that I see, I've always been focused on solutions that is for like mid-sized companies, mid-sized solutions, not
Mhm.
like scale to 1 million visitors per second. That has never been what I've had to solve. It's usually been um, you have this particular problem for a website that might have hundreds of visitors at any given time, but nothing more than that. And it was way within like the characteristics to handle
Mhm.
that. So yeah,
Yeah.
performance wise, it was not a problem at all. It was
Yeah,
great.
same here. I would say I don't remember the conferences where everyone was supposed to behave like Google or Netflix. I never
Right.
understood it because the typical enterprise project were way smaller
Yeah.
and way over engineered. So I'm completely with you. I just ask because your first client was the telco company from Belgium. So I thought
Mhm.
this is maybe a little bit more traffic, but yeah.
Well, they were using that for, there was an internal tool for their sales engineers. It
Okay.
was not
Hmm.
publicly facing. So even though there was like thousands of sales engineers, it's still like a couple of requests a second. It's like nothing.
Okay.
So
And how popular was Rive One?
way more popular than I thought. Like when I sort of lost interest in 2010, 2012, I kind of
Hmm.
thought like, well, this could have been more. But then in the decade that followed, I kept running into people that were using it and that like had it in production and had just been running for years without any issues.
Hmm.
Um, I never really, I'm not a marketing guy, so I never really track visitor numbers
Hmm.
or, and then we were also in the day where you did not have GitHub and you did not have all of that stuff. So you would have to start doing download counters for whatever like binary you would send out. So I never really paid attention to that.
Hmm.
But there was a good little community of people that were passionate in helping out and writing documentation and contributing, and it was pretty cool. But
But
yeah,
you also had a template engine, right? You had to. I mean, back
yes,
then, yeah. So was it like JSP like or JSF like, so or Velocity? What was it?
it is nothing like any of that. So let me take one step back,
Hmm.
which I think might be interesting. So I reactivated the Rife project a little bit over a year ago
Hmm.
because, so in the meantime, I did a bunch of other stuff. Like I said before, I'm a musician and I've always been active in music. And I've been extremely fortunate to work together with Moog Music,
Hmm.
which is one of the companies that invented the synthesizer.
Hmm.
Um, and over the last 8 years, I've become like director of software engineering there, and all the software projects are sort of being handled by me.
Hmm.
And about a year and 4 months ago, we wanted to launch something in direct software sales, a product that we wanted to push directly to customers.
Hmm.
And I started looking for existing solutions. I couldn't find anything that allowed it to be as consciously tailored in terms of checkout flow and user experience.
Hmm.
And I was like, you know what? I used to write these web applications. Surely this can't be that hard, because it
Hmm.
was a very simple, straightforward thing. Basically, someone wanted a product. They said buy. It does the checkout process. Stripe and PayPal have fixed all the hard problems.
Hmm.
So you just have to integrate with that and send them an email and a serial number, and that's it. Like it can't be that hard, right?
Hmm.
Um, but we wanted everything to be branded as Moog. We wanted to have a specific attention to detail to every individual step, and none of the solutions offered that. So I said, okay, well, I'll do a little spike. I was out of the loop for quite a while in the server side realm, and I started with this micro framework Spark. I don't know if you know it.
Okay.
It's not Apache Spark, but Spark framework, which looked like the best choice to me
Hmm.
from when I was surveying. Um,
How you found Spark? This is interesting, right? Because so
mm,
and another interesting thing is you just kept programming Java between Rive 1 and 2, or you just
no,
focus on
I
something
stopped.
else
I
and then
stopped. Yeah, I
okay.
stopped. Yeah, I've been for the last 10 years. I've been writing synthesizers in Objective C, C++, and C.
Wow.
Um, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and I've like been publishing apps on the App Store with millions of users and like completely different, completely different industry,
Okay.
and not kept in touch with Java at all.
Hmm.
But then, like I said, I had this particular need. Figured that I could probably learn if something happened over that period of time that I needed to learn. I was very happy with the advancement that Java made. Like I
Hmm.
love the frequent releases and how innovative the language has become.
Hmm.
Um, and then I did a search and I looked at all the sort of available server side solutions, and Spark seemed like the best designed one, like the one that very pragmatic and just
Hmm.
gets it done. Um, and so I started with that, and in just a week I spiked this whole thing and wrote it out. It's like, oh, well, we got something working. I know we can make this to the end, because all the questions I had were proven. I was integrating with. Oh, that's how I found Spark, because Stripe had examples in their documentation that were using Spark.
Oh, that's
Yep,
interesting. Okay.
yep, yep. And so I had sort of my little spike running of all of the prototype. It was like, okay, template engine. So this goes back to your question. Um, sorry for the roundabout way to get to the template engine question. Um,
Hmm.
so template engine. Then I needed to choose a template engine, and I'm probably like I'm very opinionated on template engines because I think they all suck.
Hmm.
That's what I think. Um, Probably because I have a visual design mindset in when I think about layout. I'm used to thinking about an actual template. Like if you look at any visual design template, it is a document in which holes are being left open,
Hmm.
where you have symbols or snippets that you take from elsewhere and you fill them into the holes, right? Usually template engines have an execution flow.
Hmm.
That is like how GSP works. That's how, even though some like velocity says there is no execution flow, there is still like you're executing the template. So the way I think about templates is just like in the graphical design world. It's a dead document with holes that are left to be filled in, and
Hmm.
then you have symbols or snippets that you modify, and then you put them into the holes.
Hmm.
So it's almost like you're the puppet master orchestrating the template to be like created the right way. I've never thought of templates where you're inside the template and the template itself creates itself, and the template itself pulls data from outside. That always felt wrong to me.
Hmm.
So when I was working on that prototype using Spark for this e-commerce solution, I then had to actually pick a template engine. I was like, I could find, I couldn't find anything I liked again. Even though the Spark framework is pretty cool, I like that a lot.
Hmm.
And so it's like, you know what? I wonder how hard it would be to port my old template engine and make it work with like Java 17 and plug it into the Spark execution flow.
Hmm.
And so I had this, it had been this gnawing thing like for the last 10 years. Like, I kind of want to redo Rife and I want to do it like with everything I've learned over the last 2 decades. And I had this like half started project open like for forever.
Hmm.
Um, it's like, okay, let's just do this. Let's focus on the template engine. Um, and I basically got through that in a week. Um,
Hmm.
and I I redid it from scratch because there were some problems with the parser that I always wanted to solve. And I had written my own custom parser back in the day, but then I wanted to use Antler and actually have something that was robust and it could give me good error reporting and that I could like very easily see how the actual like language like structure was of the template engine.
Hmm.
Um, so that went really well, and I got that done faster than I expected. Um, and then I was like, okay, so now I need to plug this into Spark. And then I was like, no, Spark is pretty much a micro framework. I wonder, it just kept happening. It's like, I wonder if I like, port the continuations from Rife over to Java 17 and
Hmm.
then just make it very like lightweight, just like Spark is, framework to be able to hook into that. So that was like the next week. Um, and then basically in 3 weeks' time, I had ported over. And then the next part was, oh, now I need to interact with the database. It's like, do I really have to like go for Hibernate or any of the other solutions? Like I have that database engine. I wonder what would happen if I ported this over to
Hmm.
Java 17, which I then did the next week. And each time I was sort of building the application. And so in basically in less than a month, I had Rive 2 created that had most of the building blocks necessary to build this e-commerce solution. And then I needed to do more. Like we needed to have an admin side, we needed to have reporting. We then
Hmm.
needed to build that out to multiple products and a cart and multiple languages and all of that. And I wanted to hand this over to my team.
Hmm.
Um, and so I was like, okay, guys, because no one there had done any web programming. And I was like, okay, this is an experiment. Let's see how we do with this. And so I was writing documentation while implementing Rife 2
Mhm.
while they were working as a team on implementing the rest of the e-commerce solution. And over the course of a little bit over 2 months, we built that whole thing out afterwards. And I published the next version of the framework, fully documented. And the documentation had like basically served my team in order to understand how to use what was being created, basically.
Mhm. Now see how productive Java actually is, right? So you
It's
built
insane. It's so
this is
cool.
incredible.
I love it. Yes. And every change that they've made has been for the better. Like it, Java 17 offers so much affordances to be productive in code, and then with IntelliJ IDE allowing you to just breeze through and use your code as your guide,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
There's no need to look anything up. You can just type and do stuff and get results almost immediately.
Mhm.
Um, Lovely.
And regarding Rife, a question. So is the Rife everything? I mean, even the HTTP stack you wrote from scratch, or is it based on Jetty, Tomcat, or whatever? So is it like a full stack Rife, completely independent, from any other backend service, or is it based on something?
It's based on the servlet API, so you can run it as like a war archive anywhere, or it's got Jetty or Tomcat if you want to. Like you can flip them out, embedded if you just want to run it standalone.
Okay, so the Rife one was servlet based, right?
Yeah, this too. This is also servlet based.
Okay, so it's servlet
It's
based.
actually filters
Mhm.
based. It's using filters more than servlets.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this interesting concept. Okay, so of course, I mean, Struts was also servlet based, and
Mm.
JSF were also servlet based. I thought, you implemented everything from scratch because you needed the continuations. This was my
No, it's
assumption.
not necessary because, uh, like I said, those are partial continuations. If you're interested in the continuations for the user logic, not for
Hmm.
what people are doing now with the lightweight threads, and
Hmm.
what is Project Lombok, right?
Project Loom and virtual threads.
Loom,
Hmm.
Loom, sorry, Project Loom. Um, that is to handle server side connections, right? To
Hmm.
be able to scale without paying the price of having running threads.
Exactly. So you can very efficiently wait. So it could
Right.
be related actually to Rive 2 because
Mhm.
if you could instrument the virtual threads, then you
Right.
could have millions of continuations
Right.
in parallel,
Yep.
working for you. Hmm.
So they actually work together. We've got that running. So Rife is now has got multiple people in the project again, because it's interesting how everyone from the past is coming back out of the woodworks. I don't know if you remember Eric Tauvin.
Yes, but I don't know from where. I know the name, but
Yeah, he had a link blog that was extremely popular like 15 years ago,
mhm,
um, where he would like every week publish his take on the news.
mhm,
And it was part of a magazine, and they would republish his stuff. So he was very popular. And we got back in touch, not through Blue Sky, but we got back in touch over Mastodon, the other new social media
mhm,
framework, social media network. And he was looking into some problems with URL encoding and decoding, and we started looking into that. And then we had this little project that we did together to build a better URL encoder and decoder.
mhm.
And then he wanted to rewrite his blog, and he was interested in looking at Rife, and then we started working on that together. And then we ended up so that's like another. I don't even know why I did this, but I'm still very happy I did. So last piece of infrastructure, I was working with my team on getting that e-commerce site up and running.
Mhm.
I had to convince them to use Gradle or Maven, and I
Mhm.
was like, "Holy shit! Do I really want to go down that route? Like, they're gonna hate me."
Uh-huh.
So, and I hate them personally too. Like, I just can't stand it.
Mhm.
And so it's like, I wonder what would, and it basically was just a joke. Cameron Purdy from Tangasol, the coherence. Like I was bitching about Gradle on social media, and
Uh-huh.
Cameron was replying, and I was like, maybe I'm just basically joked. It was also on Mastodon, I think. I basically joked, and it's like, maybe I should just build my own build tool that only uses pure Java.
Uh-huh.
Just started laughing at me, and I was like, you know what? Maybe that's not a bad idea. And so we started that. Like Eric Tauvin had been working on this other build tool together with Cedric Beust, guy from TestNG.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
What was that build? Cobalt? Was it? What was it again?
I know Cedric, but I didn't knew he created EGB Docklet. He worked for BA and also had him on the podcast. But I had no idea
So
that
he
Cedric
created
also had a build tool.
Yeah, so Cobalt, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, so he had that build tool, and he and Eric worked on that together. And it was mainly like relying on Kotlin. And it was popular for a while, apparently, but then sort of lost steam. And Eric had always been sort of interested in like productive build tools that get out of your way and just let you focus on the other stuff without having to mess with the build stuff. And so I was like prototyping, like using pure Java for a build tool, and he got really excited, and that became now our project for the last 6 months. We've been basically working on that.
What's the name of the project?
Sorry?
What is the name of the project, of the build project?
BLD.
BLD.
Yep. It's basically, you use Java to write your build logic, and you like using closures and functional interfaces. It makes it really easy to write. Like it's like a DSL in Java.
So listen, what we have to do, I have to reinvite you back. And what I would like to talk a little bit more about, Rife 2. What were the challenges in migration? And about your synthesizers, also really interesting story, because it seems like a really great company with nice design. So if I would really like to know more about that, and of course, pure Java build tool, because what I'm also a huge fan is there's no dependencies. I don't like to just pick framework to have. I think Java is powerful enough right now that you can achieve a lot without any external dependencies. So I'm really interested in it.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Like, why do I have to pull down all this stuff? All I want to do is compile my code and package and run it. Like that's all I want to do, and run the tests. Like it's all I want to do.
Yeah.
And then the really cool thing that then happened, like we realized that how you have all these plugins for Gradle and Maven and whatnot, right? If your build tool is Java, you can use any Java jar as part of your build logic. Like you don't really need a plugin system. You can use anything you want. So you can very easily integrate with whatever, like code analysis tool or report generator or.
Hey, we have to stop here. Otherwise, we'll talk for 2 hours. So this is just just too interesting for me.
Sorry.
Where people can find you on the internet? So do you have a handle where I can find you, and Rife2, or I will put it in the show notes.
Rife2.com is for the framework, but I have my own company called Uwyn. It's UWYN.com. Stands for use what you need, but just those 4 letters.
Wow,
and
cool name.
Thank you. And that sort of has a link to all the stuff that I'm doing.
So what do you do with the company? People can hire you, or what's the deal with Uwyn?
It's been a shell around me for forever. It used to be what I like when I was creating these solutions in Belgium. That used to be the company that I did everything for. But then now in the US, like there's a lot. I started doing 3D printing, and I'm actually selling 3D printed products through that company also.
Okay.
So yeah, it's sort of a vehicle around me in order to be able to legally sell stuff.
Very good.
Yeah.
So thank you, and I have to reinvite you back because you're a really interesting person, and lots of interesting frameworks. And what I'm really is this really interesting project because you forgot Rife for 10 years, right? Or not forgot, you didn't maintain it for 10 years, and then you just modernize that. And this is really interesting project. So maybe we have a chat about the details because I'm really
Yeah,
interested in it.
that would be
So
awesome.
so
Anytime.
thank you for your time. It was really great
Thank
to
you.
talk to you.
Yeah, and I hope we get to meet each other in person someday after all those years.
Maybe Java Polis or Devox. Java Polis,
Yeah,
you remember that? So
yeah,
Devox Belgium, maybe.
yeah. Maybe I'll try to make it out this time.
Perfect.